earlier just this week, Madeline and I got the chance, because of one of the overseers of Alive Church being so generous to send us to a conference, we got to be in Fort Myers, Florida at the Next Level Pastors Conference. It was an incredible time being with other pastors and being encouraged and all that. And we were kind of looking forward to the idea of being able to get away to Florida, here at the beginning of fall. And while the weather was really nice here, we were thinking, oh, it must be really nice there to be in Florida at the beaches, right there in the Gulf and all that. And so I had this sense that when we got to the beaches, they would just be crystal clear water and that we'd be able to see our feet and see all these tropical fishes going around. I'd never been to the Gulf of Mexico, and I'd seen pictures, and that's what I expected. And when we got there to the beach the day before the conference started, we went there and we were kind of like, it's more clear than like Atlantic City or Ocean City or Virginia Beach or something like that. It's more clear than that, but it's really not that clear at all. Like, you really can't see much at all. The sand was cool. It was white-ish sand, and that was cool, but it wasn't quite what we had thought it was going to be. And then for me, I really love seafood. Madeline, not so much, but I love seafood. And either way, I thought, okay, I'm going to look into it. And I found this restaurant for us to go to that first night that looked to be right on the water, overlooking the Gulf, and that you would be able to see the sunset just right over the water with this great, fresh seafood, incredible stuff. And when we got in there and actually ordered the food, I went a bit expensive. I mean, we all have different, levels of what we consider to be expensive and not, but for me, this was a bit of a pricey dinner that I was choosing for myself because I really wanted some good seafood, And what happens is we get there and the sun is setting over, well, it's not even like really the Gulf of Mexico. We're in this like lagoon, so we're kind of in this off kind of side area, and it's a beautiful sunset anyway, but not quite what I thought it was going to be. And then the food was definitely not what I thought it was going to be. At a certain point, you start thinking, okay, if I'm going to pay this much money, I want it to be really, really good. And mine was pretty good. Madeline's was really bad. Like, I really felt bad for her tasting a little bit of hers. You couldn't put enough salt on that dish to get it to have any flavor. It just was so okay. It was, pretty disappointing. These were moments of disappointment that I got to experience just this week. But then let me acknowledge the elephant in the room, y'all. I really do. I love our homestyle church that we've been able to do for the last 18 months. But I was really anticipating that today would be the day that our amazing church would have its first Sunday in our new building. I was looking forward to that. It's disappointing and hurtful that we're not there yet. And it's definitely a different level, let's just acknowledge this, of disappointment than the beach not being as clear, with the water and all that, or the food not being as good at the restaurant that we went to the other day. Definitely different levels of disappointment. Now, don't you wish that you had no idea what I was talking about here? This feeling of disappointment thing. Like, you're listening, don't you wish that you could be listening and going like, I'm not following this guy at all. Like, are you? Like what is he talking about with this whole, like, things not going the way you want them to? Like, don't you wish? Can you imagine if that would be the case for your life? Where you just had no idea what it was like to want something and get something else? Like, but it isn't the case, is it? Like, you totally know what I'm talking about. You've had meals disappoint you before, I'm sure. You've had beaches disappoint you before. I'm not a big beach guy, so I expect that everyone's had a beach that's disappointed them. But anyway, but you've also had books you read disappoint you, movies you went to see disappoint you, people you dated disappoint you, dreams that you had for your life leave you with disappointment as well. What is disappointment? Now, if I can get some help from my graphics department here today, let's go ahead and throw some graphics here. This is high tech today. All right, thank you, graphics department. We're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna show you what disappointment is visually here a little bit. Now, so what you have here is we have expectations. Let me just get us to understand that we have expectations. All right. So we've got expectations, and then what we have is instead, let me just kind of get us this. What we have as well as our expectations is reality. Now, what happens is when reality falls short of our expectations, then we have disappointment. I know you can't read it, but it's disappointment right there. So if you're taking notes, just draw that out yourself. Expectations are up here, reality's right here, and we have disappointment in the middle there. And there's so much possibility here with these two things. Sometimes, actually, reality exceeds our expectations. Sometimes that's how way it works. You know, that the reality line is actually up here and the expectations are down here. Sometimes that gets to happen, and that leads us to joyful surprise. We're like, oh, that's awesome. I didn't expect it to be that good, but it was really good. Sometimes, actually, what ends up happening is that we have our expectations and reality are pretty much the same, which leads us to a sense of confidence in our ability to predict what will happen. This is what I thought what would happen, and this is pretty much what did happen. And sometimes expectations seem to go north of reality, which leads to disappointment. When we start saying things like, I thought it would be better than this. I didn't think it was going to turn out quite like this. I would have never expected that to happen. Now, isn't that an interesting thing about disappointment when you really think about it? That sometimes it's really clear what you expect. But plenty of times, you didn't realize your expectations until they weren't met. You didn't even know you had them until they weren't met. Like, I didn't realize I didn't want to get a zit on my nose for my first date with them until I got one. But yeah, I didn't want that. Disappointed, I would say, you know? Or I didn't quite realize that I didn't specifically want my dog to chew on the leg of our brand new couch while we were gone. But yeah, didn't want that. And when I came home and found out that it was the case, disappointed. Now, disappointments come as painful reminders to us that we don't have as much control over the situations of our life as we so badly wish that we did. And so I want us to look at something that the brother of Jesus once wrote down to some of first century Christians that I felt really clicked with me this weekend as I had to suddenly pivot and come up with a whole new message for our church. But James, in his book, I think gives us something really profound for us to think about this weekend especially. So James 4:13-17, he writes, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills." You know, we used to say back in our country days, if the Lord wills and the creek don't rise. Some of y'all are too northerners to know what I'm talking about there, but you know what I'm saying? Like, if the Lord wills and the creek don't rise, we will live and do this or that. As it is, he says, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Now, that last sentence might feel like an accident, like kind of feels like it's a change of subject. Whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. But I want you to hold on to that last sentence in your memory, because we're going to come back to it here at the end, and we'll see how it isn't a change of topic at all, actually. But James, in this book and in this section here, he writes about this sense that we have a plan for our lives, and if we're not careful, that we can forget that God superintends over those plans. We can forget how little control we actually have over this life that we're living. And I've found that when we forget that, and we go long enough forgetting that, and then are suddenly made aware of that, it hurts. Like, it can be crushing for us. It can feel in those moments when disappointment really sets in, when the expectations and the reality are not lining up. It can feel like God's abandoning us, maybe even. And what I've come to find out is that disappointment is like God setting up an appointment for us to chat. Like, disappointment is God's appointment for us to have a conversation. I love what 1 Peter says in the New Living Translation. It's put this way: give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. So since God cares about us, cares about the disappointments in life, let's have that conversation. So I want us to imagine ourselves here having a conversation with God about the disappointments of life. And there are three questions that I'm going to pose as though they were kind of coming from God as he counsels us when it comes to the disappointments that you and I have faced, are facing, and will face in life. The first question, if you have your phone or you want to get some pen and paper, ready to take it down, here's the first question. How are you holding your expectations? So again, I feel like God's asking us, and let's reflect on it. How are you holding your expectations? Some of them may be quickly fashioned in like Play-Doh. We just kind of put them together real quick, and yet some of our expectations are like carved in stone, and we've got a lot of them. And we hold them with such a strong grip of this is what really needs to happen. If everything's going to be okay, this is how life needs to go. It's too easy for our goals to become our gods. We have a sense of this is what needs to happen in my life. This is what needs to happen in my marriage, in my kids' life, in my family, in my singleness, in my work, in my neighborhood, or in my, whatever it might be. It's so easy for our goals to become our gods. And then we relate to God, in all honesty, as a means to helping us succeed in our mission, in our lives. So disappointment can actually be a blessing then in revealing any issues in our hearts like this that need to be exposed. See, is God and His love sufficient enough for us, or do we need Him to check some boxes for us and provide certain things for us for Him to then be enough? We can find ourselves in these moments of disappointment being like, God, don't you care? Like, don't you care about what's going on? And I'm wondering actually if maybe it isn't that God, it's exactly what He's doing, is caring. He's caring for us because He's going, hey, I care about the idolatry of your heart, that you aren't noticing what's happening in there. And I need to reveal it to you in this way. Like I said, it's too easy for our goals to become our gods. So this day we will go and do business like that James wrote about, and it will take this long, and it will be this effective. I think that's what happened with Israel, in fact, and what led them to creating a literal idol. See, the golden calf that Israel created as soon as they got out of Egypt, the golden calf was created out of an impatience and a disappointment that things weren't going the way that they wanted to. They thought, okay, Moses is going to go meet with God, and then he'll be right back, and then we'll go about figuring out what it looks like to live in this new free life that God has gotten us into. And things weren't going the way that they planned. The expectations they had was not meeting up with reality, and there was disappointment. And what they then decided to do is maybe they will just take control of things ourselves and build a golden calf. And I wonder, isn't that maybe how our golden calves today still get formed? Like, our disappointments can reveal which appointments mattered most to us. What appointments where we expected reality and our expectations to meet up. That's an appointment. That's a meeting that was supposed to happen. And when they didn't, our disappointments and the way they feel to us reveal what we value. And I think we need to lean into those moments of discovery. When we do, we get a chance to discover something about ourselves, something about our expectations, about our priorities and what really matters, about our most real and genuine values that we have. So that's the first question of reflection for us when we experience disappointment. The second one is, how are you coping? So when you're in disappointment and all that, how are you coping? Because disappointment hurts viscerally, doesn't it? Like, it hurts for some of us, depending on the level of disappointment. It can hurt like deeply, like you feel it. And so hurting leads us to coping. I mean, can't you just picture the person who's getting a tattoo in a painful place, or one of those movies when they all of a sudden have to like pull a knife out of the person, and they're grabbing something to hold on to while they pull it out and all that kind of stuff. We grab something to hold on to sometimes when we're going through painful moments like disappointment. So how are you coping? What are you grabbing a hold of in that moment? When we deal with disappointment, we can grab a hold of blame. That's this person's fault. Man, I can't believe they did that. We start blaming people. Speaking harshly, we get a little bit angry. Arguing about small and insignificant things. Or maybe we grab a hold of wallowing in self-pity. We just feel so, nothing goes my way. Nothing ever works out the way I want it to. We feel bad for ourselves, and we wallow in that. Or maybe we grab a hold of harboring bitterness. We just keep on thinking of the people that led us to this point and people we feel like are responsible, or maybe we try to assert control again. Some of us think the reason our plans failed was because we didn't plan well enough. And while that sometimes maybe is a factor in it, what happens is we can lose sight of the fact that man plans his ways, but God orders his steps. So if we just cope by trying to get more detailed or more determined in our planning, that's like the people in James's example that he gave in James 4 there, basically going, I hear God saying that we are a mist that quickly disappears and we don't know what today or tomorrow holds. So let's try to get a better sense of the weather conditions for our trip that we're talking about going on. Let's also investigate the market conditions in that area we're traveling to see if our business will work well. Let's make sure to check our mules that they're healthy and they're not going to die on us on the way. And let's make sure that we have more than enough food and supplies just in case something goes wrong. That's our solution. Dude, you've got to just at some point acknowledge that you can't control everything. But it's how some of us deal with the pain of disappointment. It's how we cope. Some of us just aren't good again until we have regained control. But what if you can't? Will you be all right if you can't gain control over that situation going on in your life right now? Will you be okay? Will you actually find peace and joy if you can't find some way to control things again? What about those other coping options? The blaming, wallowing, harboring bitterness, or self-medicating? How are these shaping your heart right now? Listen, disappointment isn't a rare occurrence in the human experience. I have come to find that out. I'm sure you have too. It's not rare for us to experience disappointment. And each time that we do, it's shaping our hearts and our minds. And how we cope with it is shaping our hearts and our minds. So may I suggest that we cope in the most healthy ways possible? I don't necessarily, just so you know, I don't necessarily have a formula for that, where I can give you chapter and verse for every situation, every disappointment, because specific disappointments need handled differently. But disappointment often leaves us feeling, think about it, feeling brokenhearted and crushed in our spirit, doesn't it? So I love what Psalm 34:18 says. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. Find your help in Jesus, who's coming near to you in that moment. Believe it or not, he is coming near to you when you're going through disappointment. The firm foundation, the only firm foundation that we get, the one that is sufficient to meet us in our lowest and most crushed moments, is wanting to speak life to us in that moment. So, how are you holding your expectations? Secondly, how are you coping? What are you running to? And then thirdly and finally, how are you seeing all of this? Like, how are you seeing all of this? Disappointment comes at the divergence of what I want with what I got, right? Like when those things, with what I want and what I got, when they diverge, it naturally helps us then to see, okay, well, what did I want? It reveals what I wanted. And it also reveals my perspective of what I got, reality. And my relationship with the inevitable distance between my dream world and the real world. It reveals all of this. But sometimes I don't even see all that I just got until later. Like, I sometimes have a sense of what I got, what reality was, but I don't always see all that I got until later. Have you ever been there? Haven't you ever had a disappointment turn out to be something even better? You just didn't realize it at first. Like at first you're like, oh man, I can't believe that it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. And then you realize it worked out better than I would have gotten originally. See, that's the thing. This can be a powerfully humbling moment when we realize that man plans his ways, but God orders our steps. That's why James talked about not realizing this reality as being, that when we don't realize that reality, that we're showing arrogance. That's what it is, evidence of arrogance. We're not God. We don't know all that he does, see all that he does. And so we don't have quite as much a clue about everything going on around us as we thought we did. We can exercise dominion over our little section of the sandbox that we have, but God superintends over the whole world. And it might be hard for our perception to see any good coming out of disappointment. When it happens, it's bad, right? But we should often remember that we only see part of the story. We're not seeing everything. There's more going on outside of the frame that we can't see, and things aren't always as black and white as we would tend to believe that they are. We don't know everything. And a perspective of gratitude can actually then come from disappointment. And if it does, think about it, we're so much better off for it, aren't we? See, a gratitude for all that does go our way or is going well in our lives. Let me process with you the current example that I'm finding myself with this weekend. I was so disappointed to be told on Friday afternoon that we wouldn't, by the city, that we wouldn't be able to have our first Sunday in the building this week. Incredibly disappointed. It was crushing. And like I said, it was visceral because my expectations and reality did not align. I had plans galore that were, many plans, messed up by that one thing. It was disappointing. But what a blessing that we do already have a backup plan with Homestyle Church. A plan that we can go right into this weekend without any heads up. We already know what we're going to do. We're going to do Homestyle Church. I'm excited to spend another Sunday with our Homestyle Church. And our different Homestyle churches are excited to be back together again, even though we're still excited to get all together. Selfishly, I get to sleep in a little bit more this Sunday now because of this. On a week that was really a busy and full week for me, I got a wedding and everything going on, conference. I get to sleep in a little bit on Sunday. So personally, that's a blessing. I get one more week to prepare our church for this incredibly interesting new season that we're going to go into now in a building. I get one more week to prepare for it. I get to demonstrate to our church that we're going to do what's right, following the rules, rather than what's most desirable, which would be to be like, let's just break the rules and go in there and have our first Sunday anyway. I get to show our church that we're going to do what's right. Also, we still have the building. There's gratitude that I can have for that. The bad news that we got on Friday was not that we don't have a building. We'll never get to meet it. In fact, our landlord, just to let you guys know, just the other day accepted our offer, our proposal that is going to allow us to have 3 months, it looks like, of not having to pay our rent here at the end of the year to help us offload some of the costs that we're experiencing in the renovation and the cost of us leasing for the last 9 months and paying for that lease every month. I want you to see that I could go on and on about the fact that there's still good stuff happening amidst the disappointment. So gratitude can flow out of our disappointment when we're willing to see that all is not lost. Like, we have that sense, all is lost. It's not. Like, we kind of want to believe that it is. It isn't. There's actually still good in what God's doing in the world around us. Philippians 4:8, one of my favorite verses to go to when it comes to this idea here, says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things." I always love pointing out that it tells us what to think about. So no sense commanding something we can't actually control, right? So we must be able to control how we think. So while I can't control my circumstances, and you can't control yours either, I can control how I'm going to think about them, or what I'm going to choose to think about in the midst of them. And when I do control it, and when I do think about the things that God says here are worth thinking about, I'm better for it. You're going to be better for it. So let's actually circle back to the thoughts of those people, what was going on in the brains of those people that James was talking about earlier. Let's reread the whole thing. "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will do this or that. And as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So, whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin." Like I said, that last sentence actually gives us a critical perspective. If we think that God has been saying this whole time, listen, you have no control over anything, so just bow in submission and watch me do it all, then the last verse doesn't make sense, telling us to do anything. It doesn't make sense then. But the last verse of this passage makes sense only when we realize that we aren't God. We are a mist, that He controls everything, and we only have a limited control over a limited amount of things, which whether you believe in God or not, you got to acknowledge that, right? So it helps us in our faith to have the scriptures tell us that. But then he says, hey, with what you do have control over, do good with that. Do the right good with that. If we were to think that he doesn't want us ever planning ahead, ever, then Christ followers would make the worst builders, the worst farmers, etc. We wouldn't plant seeds, not because we're not sure if they're ever going to grow or not, or if we'll ever get to reap the rewards of our sowing and all that. And we wouldn't start construction projects, right? Because we're not sure if we're ever going to get in there. But what God is instead wanting us to see and do is to see that we are only going to see a little bit beyond us and where we're at right now, and that we're only responsible to do as well as we can with that, whatever we can see right now, in His strength. That drives us, when you start thinking about it, that really drives us towards such a dependence on the Lord. But it also frees us from the weight of having to pretend like we see so much more than we do and are capable of so much more than we really are. Instead, we do whatever right thing, godly thing, whatever the Spirit's saying to us to do that's right in front of us to do, holding our future plans, which we can still make, but with open hands. If God allows things to change from my expectations, then okay, we'll just keep following Him. Because we are serving, we are following, and we are depending on God Himself and not making idols out of our goals, out of our plans. So let me ask you, what is God looking to teach you in and through some disappointments that you've had in your life, maybe that you're going through right now? What is God trying to grow in you, to help you see as you go through this disappointment? And then also, I just want to ask you to think about this too. How could your healing in regards to how you process disappointment help others as they wrestle through it themselves? May we be people that find ourselves being drawn closer and closer to Jesus during our disappointment so that we can see Him do a work in us, but also do a work through us as others experience disappointment too, because it's a reality of life. Isn't it so much better if we can deal with that reality in a way that makes us healthier, stronger, and more effective for doing whatever God has for us to do?